Welcome back to my 100% tutorials. We're now on Beacon 2, which is both my favorite and most practice level at the time of writing this. It's non-stop action and pilot movement all the way through and has a nice collection of both tricks and movement sequences. For this reason, it's also the last level of the big three that are included in the Pilot's Challenge category. In terms of casual mechanics, this level also introduces a new gimmick, the Arc Tool. It's a gun that can power on and off various level elements both in this level and Chapter 3, including platforms, doors, and fans. This has implications for the speedrun, which can often make or break your opinion of the level. That's all there really is to mention about this level though, so without further ado, let's get started. As you fade in, immediately start sprinting and turn just slightly to the right. Then slide down the side of the staircase to get the least amount of friction. On the second space between the railings, jump, bonk the ceiling, and strafe left into the doorway. You can jump a little bit earlier if you really want to squeeze in an extra bit of time save, but it's not at all important. As you come into the first room, you can double jump to get over all these grunts and land on these monitors. This will give you a nice vantage point to slide up over to the next doorway on the right. And this brings us into the Hairpin hallway. This section is pretty much going to be a bunch of wall kicks chained together all the way through. What's tricky though is trying to control your spacing around all these electrical grids sticking out. At first, I recommend just taking the more or less intended route, kicking in between each one. But once you get a bit better at building speed with wall kicks, you can opt to skip some of them, which will in turn give you a better line. At the end of this first hallway, we're hit with a U-turn, so once again, diagonal jumps are your friend for now. And in the second hallway, just do the same as the first. At the end, you'll get to this upper room, which leads straight into Kill Room. Now, Kill Room works a bit unintuitively. Simply speaking, you just need to kill enough enemies and the door at the other side will eventually open, plus some other funky trigger shenanigans. I originally explained the entire inner workings of this sequence and different ways to optimize it, but later realized that level of detail is a bit much for this skill level and figured you're probably better off practicing Kill Room skip from the intermediate strats if you want to optimize this part of the level. So I'm just going to show you what's called 2-kill Kill Room, which is a very simple and moderately fast way of clearing the room. You're going to come in and kill this first drone. You don't need to kill it for this to work, but it's nice to get it out of the way. Then you're going to get close to this ledge, but not too close, and kill both these drones to fly up. Now as long as you don't go past this ledge and hit this trigger that spawns more enemies, the game will eventually check and see that, oh, there's not enough enemies alive, and open the door. At this point, it's safe to wall jump off this generator, minding the spinning log, then cloak and come out the exit. If you accidentally touch the trigger, it's fine. You can just kill the extra enemies and the door will eventually open once you kill enough of them. So after you've gotten the door to open, just slide hop around these enemies and turn right into this next hallway. This is another opportunity to chain a bunch of wall kicks together. I recommend starting with the left wall here, as that will usually set you up to kick off the right wall as you get to the end. Then in this next hallway, same thing. Just take a bunch of wall kicks until you get to the end. I'm hitting over 60 speed here, but as a beginner, I would just aim to hit maybe 50 or so, since wall kicks are hard to execute, but even then, cruising through at around 40 is also fine. Come around this next corner and kick off this wall just before the top of the stairs, then just slide up over to this doorway. At this upward draft, double jump backward and fly up into this room. This can be a little weird to aim since you're facing the wrong way and come into the draft at a crooked angle, so I hold back and left for these jumps and that usually puts me in a good spot. You can also just turn around if you find that simpler. Once you get up into this room though, hit the button, then slide back down where the draft used to be. Now the Arc Tool room will be unlocked and we can slide up to the entrance here. To cross this room, you can take the intended route on the left, but it's a bit faster to make use of this invisible wall below this fan on the right. The standard route is to jump off this first wall, then drop to below the fan, grab the invisible wall, and climb up to the other side. And I find with this strat, a lot of beginners aim too high and hit the fan, so I encourage you to actually try to go too low and really limit test it. You can also opt to drop down to these monitors and double jump up to the invisible wall from there if you find that easier. But as you get to the other side, you want to shoot this Marvin so it drops the Arc Tool, and we can grab it for ourselves. That's all we need from this room, so turn around, turn off this fan, then wall jump off it to get back across. I also want to make this note now, anytime you activate something with an Arc Tool switch, you want to hold it down for a somewhat generous amount of time. On rare occasions, it just won't work if you only press it for a few frames. Pretty much every runner has gotten screwed by this at least a handful of times, so I just wanted to make a special note of it. Moving on though, you'll want to jump off this wall on the right to avoid bonking and slide hop through. Activate this next door and the fan ahead, then jump into the upward draft. You'll want to strafe left and fly up into this upper room. You also have the option of trying to grab the wall here instead, which is slightly faster than hitting the ceiling and waiting to fall back down. You can opt to do an instant double jump into the updraft, and that's a little bit faster, but the trade-off is you won't have a double jump to save yourself if you mess up. In the case where you do fail to make it up top though, there's two backups you can go for. Fastest way is going to be to climb up this diagonal pipe sticking out of the overhang. This is very awkward though, so for most people I would recommend doing the other backup here, which is just falling back down to the fan and retrying. But after that, we come into the heatsink section. Once you land in this upper room, jump off this right wall to get back up to speed and cloak. This will avoid aggro from the stalkers. Keep slide hopping into this next room and move the walls up with the arc tool to block the draft. Then just sprint to the next doorway. As you enter the next room, you can fit in a slide up as you put up the next walls. Then just run around this middle wall and toward the back. At this hole in the floor, drop down a little bit and double jump forward and left, then strafe toward the exit. And now we come into heatsink skip. This is just a single jump across this gap, which skips another one of those fan draft rooms. Beginners tend to struggle with this, so I'll break it down as simply as I can. We'll start with getting on this left railing, then double jump up to this door cover and climb up a little bit. You don't want to mantle, but you do want to get as much height as possible. That's going to help you the most with this strat. But then we're going to turn right to wall run, then wall jump at the edge. Then air strafe a little bit left, and jump toward the other side to climb up. You also want to watch out for lurch in your speed here, so delay your air strafe about a half second after jumping off the wall. You can also try out a no lurch wall jump too if you find that easier, which means holding forward and left as you jump off the wall. This will allow you to just let go of forward and start air strafing immediately, which will be slightly more effective. Once you climb up the railing on the other side though, slide into this doorway. There's a necessary trigger that you need to hit here that removes an invisible wall later on. But after that, you can immediately walk back out. And we're going to grab this pipe and jump up to this next platform. Slide up across and climb up next to this yellow pipe. Now we're at the fan section. Starting off, we're going to activate this switch to make the grate open, then slide into the draft. Be careful though, because you can die if you go too early. You can feel out the timing on this if you need to, but you just need to let the grate fly off early enough to hit the next one before you. The rest of this high speed section doesn't really require any specific movement, just try to stay airborne by wall kicking repeatedly. And at the end, slow down and transition into kicking between these last three fans. And of course you'll need to turn each of them off beforehand. If you hit an invisible wall here, then it means you missed a trigger in the heatsink doorway I mentioned earlier. But from here, it's pretty much a straight shot to the finish as we backtrack to the start of the level. There is something you can do called stair slide if you have a lot of speed. It's where you literally just spam bunny hops up the stairs to keep speed. If you're at around 40 speed or lower though, you'll want to repeatedly wall jump off this left wall to regain speed. Then you just slide up to the end level trigger. And that's it for Beacon 2. In terms of raw gameplay time, it's kind of short, but with how optimized and detailed this level has become over the years, the script just became super dense, and it only gets crazier with harder strats. But first comes Beacon 3, so I'll see you there. Alright, once again with the intermediate strats, we're going to be implementing crouch tech into our routes. So starting off, we're going to slide down the stairs as usual, but then we're going to strafe to the right and crouch kick off this outer part of the railing. Then double jump and slide on this grunt, and you'll fall down right around this doorway. And of course jump over to the hairpin hallway. Since you'll probably have a bit more speed here now, you'll want to take a right-left-right kick pattern on this first hallway. If you're going really fast, like high 50s or 60 plus, you can go for just a left-right kick pattern, but you probably won't need to do this until you become very proficient at both crouch kicks and strafing. At the end of the first hallway though, you can now implement tap strafing to make the U-turn more efficiently. I'll also note that you want to make sure to pass over this bridge instead of under, because otherwise you can miss a necessary checkpoint for an upcoming trick. Moving on, this second hallway is a bit narrower, so I don't think there's any significant advantage to skipping walls, except for maybe this last one. At the end, just go from the left wall into the hole. Now in here, we're going to grab the softball from this weapon rack. This is essentially a sticky grenade launcher, which means we can boost ourselves with it. A single boost only saves about a quarter of a second on average though, so they are optimal, but it's not something you really need to worry about. I'll still point them out when they happen though. What we're really grabbing the softball for is Kill Room Skip. This is a route that death warps back to the start of the hallway and combines both an edge boost and a softball boost to jump over this really long gap, skipping Kill Room. It's the trick that every new runner spends hours on before hitting it once. Not to worry though, I'm going to do my best to break it down into manageable steps so that you can get a thorough understanding of it. To start off, we're going to turn around and take a death warp off this electrical grid, and you can softball boost off the wall if you want. This will spawn you at the U-turn spot. Now for the setup, we're going to turn, double jump toward this yellow pipe, and climb up it a little bit. This will put you at the perfect height every time without being high enough to block the ceiling later. And you also want to aim for the small white line on the pipe. After climbing, look left to start wall running, then do a lurchless wall jump around the time your crosshair overlaps with this void in the distance. This will give you the right angle off the pipe to then strafe around the smaller pipe and go for the jump. And as you pass by the pipe, shoot the softball as close to the edge as possible and slightly below you, then go for the edge boost. You can also go for a C-Fab if that's more comfortable, but theoretically it should give the same result. If you hit both the softball boost and the edge boost, you should be getting about high 40s to 50 speed off the wall. Then you can air strafe left then right to grab the wall on the other side. It's also very important that you are doing a lurchless input on the edge boost because you need every bit of speed you can get for this. You also can't afford to fall very much because the kill floor is positioned right below the ledge ahead. So you need to make sure you get a good enough trajectory from either the jump off the wall or the air strafing afterward. One can make up for the other being lackluster. When you first learn this though, most of your successful attempts are going to rely on a good initial jump, but I'll show this clip just to prove that good air strafing here can save you. If you execute the entire sequence really well, you can actually opt to crouch kick on the other side and transition straight into the next hallway, which is really fast. More often than not though, you'll have to jump around the pillar and C-Fab instead to get back up to speed. That is everything for kill room skip though, so I hope that helps you hit it with a bit of practice. For this next hallway, you can softball boost right away on the first slide hop, then just crouch kick the rest of the way, alternating between walls. If you hit the transition out of KRS and have about 60 speed or so, take a right left right kick pattern, otherwise start on the left wall. At the corner, you can do another softball boost off the wall and continue on to the updraft as usual. When you hit the button, make sure to reload the softball if you're going for boost, since we'll be doing quite a few more throughout this level. Then once again, slide back down to the arc troll room. At this corner you can go for another softball boost and tap strafe to avoid bonking. Something you may want to also consider doing here as you get faster and faster is killing the Marvin early, otherwise it'll turn off the fan, which by itself isn't a problem, but when it comes back on, there's a brief cooldown before it can be turned off again, which can mess you up. So to kill it early, just tap it with the EVA as you're jumping across, or if you replace it with the softball, shoot just a bit to the right of it to account for the draft. But the rest here is more or less the same, crouch kick off the left wall, kick off the invisible wall, and grab the arc tool. When exiting the room, you can forego grabbing the wall on the right, and just tap strafe around the corner instead. You can also throw in a softball boost here. Continue on to the next draft, and now there's a couple options to cover. The two methods I covered here of bonking the ceiling or grabbing the wall are kind of slow, so there are two faster strats, but they are harder as they require some very precise movement. While they are hard strats, I figured I'd include them here since you don't often lose any time going for them. But to get into it, the first strat is called Grate Mantle, where you air strafe directly into the sledge and mantle straight up into the next room. And if you go for this strat, if you can, you want to try to mantle as high up as possible to get a shorter animation, thus saving time. The other strat is called Mayo Bonk. This is where you bonk the lower part of the ceiling and transition straight into the next area. And this will usually be slightly faster than Grate Mantle if you retain a good amount of speed. To keep speed though, you'll usually have to approach with a sharp angle from the left side, otherwise there's a good chance that you bonk this wire sticking out of the ceiling. Unfortunately, neither of these strats have a good setup as there are a lot of factors at play. Your consistency is going to depend solely on your ability to judge your trajectory in the updraft and adjust your strafing accordingly. For the next section, C-Fab off the wall and go for a softball boost. If you did Mayo Bonk, you can instead just fall into a slide hop swing and it's pretty much the same thing. We're going to add in a crouch kick off this blue generator on the left and continue on to the fan rooms. These rooms can still be optimized a fair bit and can avoid a lot of the forced running. Starting at the first fan, wait until you get on top of this ground texture, then begin a slide hop and tap strafe left to the doorway. In the doorway, there's a small crack in the wall where the wind still sneaks through, so you want to try to land your first slide hop along that crack, because if you're grounded, the wind barely affects you. From here though, you can continue slide hopping into the next room, and if you're doing either softball or frag heatsink skip, you can stop slide hopping at the middle wall. Otherwise, you can continue the slide hop all the way to the exit. I will note that keeping speed around the middle wall is finicky due to the wind draft. I find that if you have over 40 speed and hug the wall really close, that usually yields the best results. Now we did name drop some other heatsink skip methods, so let's get into those. The fastest strat is to use a frag boost. This lets you transition into the skip immediately after exiting the room and cut straight across. And the boost is often powerful enough to get you completely over the railing and skip any extra climbing. To set this up, we're going to pull the frag as we round this middle wall and continue with the usual row. After the double jump, slide hop and straight to the right toward the railing. And at the peak of that slide hop, throw the frag down. You can also hear the beeping briefly, which lets you know you timed it correctly. If you manage to clear the railing on the other side, then you won't be able to simply slide into the doorway because you have too much speed. Instead, just hold back and left as you land, then you can move your camera left to kind of strafe and fall into the doorway. Now for the softball method, this works conceptually the same as the frag boost, but it uses a softball grenade instead. Just before you land from the double jump, shoot at the ground in front of you and do an extended slide up off the railing when jumping across. With this route, you're always going to have to climb up on the other side since the softball does give less speed than a frag. Finally, we have the crouch kick method. This method can be as fast as the softball method if you clear the railing with it, but doing so is pretty hard. Unlike the other methods, this one builds speed by C-fabbing off this light panel, then crouch kicking off the door cover. It avoids having to mess with any sort of explosion boosting, but it does require 2 instances of tap strafing back to back, which can be a bit mechanically demanding, but it's an option. For this final track of the heatsink, you can make a slight improvement to the movement by instead jumping off this yellow pipe and crouch kicking off the generator ahead. Then double jump off the yellow pipe to clear the next ledge. Something to note with this movement though is you want to grab the first pipe as high as possible, otherwise there's a good chance you'll hit the ground before the generator, preventing you from kicking off of it. For the fan section, we're going to attempt what's called fast fans, which is really just transitioning from the wind tunnel into the last room. With good execution, this can let you retain up to around 80 speed all the way through to the ending. To set this up, you'll want to try to manage your height in the wind tunnel so that you stay along the middle seam. So just do a moderate amount of kicks, try not to go too high or too low. Wait until the last hallway where the walls stop curving, then jump and tap straight to the left wall. You're not going to grab it, you're just going to wall bump and keep strafing right, which will give you a nice line into the next section. Tap strafe into another wall bump off the first fan, then with enough speed you'll be able to jump all the way across, skipping the other fans. If you're not going that fast though, you can instead just kick off one of the other fans. Your speed here is mostly going to depend on your ability to tap strafe and redirect yourself before crashing into the fan. So that's what you want to focus on the most. And with the higher speed here too, stair slide has a lot more value if you're able to hit it. But that's it for intermediate. Starting off the expert shots, we have an optional frag boost. And as a reminder, you will need to quit the menu in ENC1 in order to have frags here. For this setup, you'll sprint to the side as usual and pull the frag right when you slide at the top of the stairs. Then throw the frag down just before you reach the bottom of the stairs. You can also react to the beeping here as well. You'll want to watch out for bumping the ground here at the doorway too. If you're hitting it, you can slightly adjust by jumping a little earlier out of the slide and throwing the frag a tiny bit earlier. The movement afterward is mostly the same, though it can be pretty tight to execute properly with the extra speed. Right afterward, I want to quickly mention that you should be doing a left-right kick pattern almost always in the hairpin hallway, and you can also opt to do a spam strafe at the turn if you have a lot of speed. Moving on, we're going to revisit kill room skip, as there are a couple ways you can switch it up and improve it. First off, we're going to cover doing KRS with a softball boost and a crouch kick, instead of an edge boost. This is exactly what it sounds like. Same setup, but instead of wall running, take a crouch kick as soon as you touch the wall. While a firsty crouch kick gives the same speed as an edge boost, it's still faster overall because you aren't slowed down from the wall running. This method can be a bit overwhelming at first and hard to get good results from, but I find if you focus more on timing the kick rather than the softball, that usually helps. Next up, there is the option to completely skip getting the softball. Due to how potent crouch kicks are, it is the viable strategy to not even bother with the softball boost. If you do opt to do this, you'll save a small chunk of time, about 2 seconds, from being able to death warp earlier. But this is partly cancelled out by not having access to softball boost for the rest of the level. I'll also note that you still need to hit the trigger at the end of the hallway, otherwise the Marvin with the arc tool will not spawn later in the level. The trigger exists just a little bit past this texture change on the wall. So you want to grab the wall around there, then 180 and jump into the electrical grid as usual. For the actual skip now, there are 2 methods that you can go for. The first one is simply just a crouch kick. Same setup and everything, but you're relying completely on the speed from a crouch kick to cross the gap. So you're generally going to need a first or second tick kick to make it work comfortably. The other method is to use a frag boost. It can be fairly tricky to learn at first because it's a drop behind frag that you do right after the kick. To set this up though, you're going to buffer the frag pull out of the black screen, then we're going to wall run on the pipe immediately instead of climbing, then go for the crouch kick and drop the frag. Luckily, you should be going about 50 speed or so off the kick, which gives you a lot of time to react to the frag beeping. This frag also just feels really good to hit, as it's not uncommon to fly through the hallway ahead with around 90 speed or so. Fast forwarding to the arc tool pickup, we're going to learn fan boost, and it's exactly what it sounds like. we boost ourselves with the fan and carry the speed to the next couple of rooms. This strat is kind of infamous in the community for being a feel it out strat, but I don't really think it needs to be. Conceptually how this works is you slide up into the draft to get boosted, then you turn off the fan to not get carried away, then you double jump and tap strafe a bunch to redirect that speed toward the exit. And you usually want to aim for around 60 to 70 speed off of this. What makes this hard is you can't really turn off the fan off reaction, it boosts you too fast otherwise. You need to anticipate the timing beforehand, which can take a while to really feel out, which is where I think that sentiment comes from. As a general guide though, if your speed is low, you turn it off early, and if you have too much speed, you are late. You can also slide up to the left when entering the draft, and that will give you a bit more time to turn it off if you find that helpful. What I like to do here though is to use spam strafing. Since it allows me to get more tap strafe out of a jump, it allows me to save attempts that have higher speeds than usual. Combine this with slide hopping to the left, and it feels like you can do it off reaction, which is really nice, but it does require you to be comfortable with spam strafing. Moving on to the final fan section though, there's quite a lot to cover starting from the switch here. There are actually two different ways to execute this entire final section that differ quite significantly from each other. The first is without Darkslide, and the other is with Darkslide, which is the trickier but faster route, so it may be worth taking a peek ahead before deciding what to commit to. Starting off with non-Darkslide strats though, the first thing we're going to cover is Grate Mantle. I was debating whether I wanted to include this or not since it is kind of obsolete at this point, but I thought some people might prefer it anyway, so I figured I'll go over it. At the beginning of the sequence, you can activate the switch, then the grate opens and flies away. So you can probably guess what happens if you mantle it when it flies off. You go a lot faster. The setup for this is very precise though, and hitting it with any amount of consistency takes a lot of practice. The standard way to do this is to mantle the middle of this ledge, then snap your camera to the left, shoot the switch, and start sprinting all at the same time. Sprint straight to this left corner, then jump and turn to the left once you get to the end. With any luck, you'll mantle the grate, your camera will spasm, and you'll start the tunnel section with a ton of extra speed. And if you don't hit it, there's no real consequences, so it's worth going for. Coming up right after this though is Corner Cut. Assuming you don't hit Grate Mantle, you can tap shift to take a better line through this beginning section of the wind tunnel. It is pretty tight though because it takes many inputs to redirect yourself far enough. The way I do this is I'll jump quite a bit before the edge of the wall and tap strafe off that jump. This gives me a farther line to the left and also more time to fit in all the inputs. Then I diagonal jump and try to fit in 3 tap strafes afterward. And because of how lurch strength works, the earlier you do those inputs after the jump, the more effective they will be. Since you do expend your double jump here, this strat is fairly risky. You will usually fall to your death if you bonk one of the support beams, so I only recommend going for this in runs if you're comfortable with it. However, if you bonk this beam in the middle, you can actually strafe to the right to dodge the other one and still make it across. Now if you're a routing connoisseur, you might be thinking if this is what you can do with regular tap strafing, what can you do with spam strafing? The answer is a lot more. You can take a very direct line through this room. If you spam strafe off the first wall jump, you can double jump and spam strafe again to grab this wall in the middle, then you can jump directly from here to the last wall in the tunnel, skipping a lot of the winding and curving you would usually have to do. Another use for spam strafing here is to actually corner cut after Grate Mantle. You would think you have too much speed to pull it off, but spam strafing is just that effective. You pretty much want to spam as many inputs as possible as soon as you leave the first wall, expending both your wall jump and your double jump. If you can execute it right, you'll end up right where the normal corner cut would put you. And bonking the beam this way can still be saved by strafing to the right afterward. Moving on though, we're going to end off the level with a new strat. This is called Fzzy Fans. You can opt to not turn off the first fan and instead use it to gain a lot of speed and carry it to the end of the level. The setup for this is very similar to fast fans. We're going to get in the middle of the right wall, jump across once it stops curving, wall bump, but then we're going to double jump and tap shift into the first fan without turning it off. Kick off of it and it will throw you into the second fan at a very high speed. Then you need to hit another kick off the second fan to hopefully keep most of that speed to the end of the level. To be more specific though, there's 2 things you want to focus on to maximize your speed here. The first, as I mentioned before for fast fans, is good tap strafes. Just be able to redirect yourself to the right enough so you aren't fully crashing into the fan and losing speed. The second thing is you want to be approaching from the far left side of the fan. This will make you spend more time in the draft, giving you more speed. Doing this is how you consistently get mid 90s to 100 on this trick. But other than that, the rest of the level is the same. Now finally, we can cover Darkslide. This is a strat where you get pushed down by this grate as it flies off, which causes a weird interaction with the fan draft in this room. Your speed gets pretty much doubled as you enter the wind tunnel, making it much faster, but there are some repercussions from doing this, which I'll get into later. When most people first learn this trick, it seems a lot harder than it is, because they're confused about what they're even trying to do in the first place, so I want to help clarify this. Once I understood it, it felt easier and more consistent than Grate Mantle. To get pushed down by the grate, enough so that it gives you the extra speed, you need to be in a very precise position when it flies off. You need to be slightly behind it and just left of the right corner of it. You want to be horizontally lined up with this gap in the vent blades. And lastly, you need to be around the peak of your jump, or more preferably, a tiny bit after it. If you can satisfy those conditions, then your chances are as good as they'll ever be. The way I go about this is to slide up to the right corner and strafe back to the left to get in that position. This gives me a nice smooth transition into the fan sequence. When first learning this though, I'd recommend doing the setup I made just to get a feel for it. You'll want to identify that same gap in the vent blades, or alternatively, the yellow line on the ground. Then back up until you intersect with this line pattern on the ground. Just stand roughly here, it's not too precise. Then you're going to shoot the switch. When the grate rotates to a straight vertical position, sprint and slide along that line. Then when it tops out and hits the ceiling, jump. This is not completely foolproof since it's still a precise trick. You'll need to play with it a little bit, but it should serve as a good starting point for getting a feel for how you need to be positioned. When you do manage to hit it though, you'll know because you'll slam into the back wall at nearly 400 speed. But getting back to the way I and most top runners do Darkslide, it's going to work about the same. You're still going to slide and jump at the same time, but now you need to control your horizontal position a lot more and do the whole thing in one fluid sequence. Since this is a less rigid approach, you'll need to get used to slightly adjusting your execution. Maybe if you land on the platform farther forward, you'll need to stop for a beat after activating the switch. Maybe if you land on the platform farther back, you'll need to activate the switch later, or maybe you'll want to slide earlier to make it more time, etc, etc. Something that can also happen when attempting this is you'll get kind of knocked down, but not get any extra speed. I find this is usually the case when my setup is ever so slightly off, so if that's happening to you consistently, you're very close to hitting it, but you need to slightly tweak something about your approach. Moving on though, since you get knocked down a bit from the grate, you'll have to double jump in order to not bonk the wall below. In this tunnel section, the acceleration you would usually get from the wind is no longer present due to the weird interaction we just had. So from here, you'll need to stay crouched the entire time, which will cause you to wall bump on each of these walls and lose minimal speed. You'll also want to strafe along the curves of the wall and keep as parallel of the line as possible. This will also help you retain a lot more speed versus just crashing into all of the walls at a harsh angle. I also try to double jump and tap strafe to the next wall in between each wall segment. This avoids the harsh angles I just mentioned and also lets you maintain your height because getting this many wall bumps repeatedly can eat your inputs sometimes. Something that also happens here, due to just the sheer speed that you're moving at, is the camera moves around a lot because you're basically spamming wall bumps, so you'll need to be ready to whip your camera around when that starts happening. I also find if you keep your camera facing parallel along the wall, that helps to prevent it from going all wacky. When you get to the end of the tunnel though, you'll again want to be pretty particular in how you set up this last section. As you round the corner, you want to jump and start holding back to slow yourself down. I typically aim for speeds somewhere in the 130 to 150 range. If you have this speed and this height, it will set you up perfectly every time. Then you can fall and strafe left and do a crouch kick at the end of the hallway. At this point, it's the same as Fast Fans, only a little faster. Tap strafe or spam strafe into the fan, wall bump, and jump across. With good execution, this can let you keep up to 90 or even 100 speed, and if you want to hyper optimize this, you can also go for another kick off the last fan if you wish. Now you might be thinking, why not just do Fzzy Fans? Well, you can, and it is what I do, but it's a lot less forgiving. When we started this trick with a weird fan interaction, it also changed how these fans behave. They push you way harder than they usually do, so it's way easier to get pushed into the death trigger if you go for Fzzy Fans. To hit it consistently, you need to enter from the far left and hit a really potent spam strafe. It's a game of trying to make the fan take as long as possible to shoot you to the right, so that you can actually clear the next fan. After this though, the ending is about the same, just stair slide up to the end of the level. I do want to touch on stair slide briefly though at this skill level, as it becomes easier to bonk at the top when going high speeds, like anywhere from 80 to 120ish. While it's kind of a chaotic segment, you do have some control. You can do the usual 2 double jumps, but you can also play around a bit and just do a single jump on the last one to account for higher speed, or you can even do a super glide to get a lower jump while still not losing your speed. While I don't have particular setups for this, I would recommend playing around with these different options at different speeds. But there it is, all of Beacon 2 finally done. I knew this would be an above average video length, but I was not anticipating it to be one of the longest. Even though it has less gameplay than several other levels, the combination of optimization throughout the years, zero downtime, and many strat variations really beefed up the length, and that's after retroactively omitting some strats from the script for simplicity. But that's going to do it. Thanks for watching, and good luck in your practice, especially this time around. See ya.